He's got his phone in his hand. He's paralyzed. He's levitated a few inches off the ground, and he sees a gray standing at the gate. He is floated toward the gate. He and this gray go through the gate out onto the golf course, and he sees a gigantic orange ball of light out on the golf course. As he gets closer to it, he realizes that inside of that is a disc-shaped silver chrome saucer.
Holy heck, that can't be aircraft. There actually is a large unidentified object circling the Earth at incredible speed.
Naturally, we are very curious to know where it is you come from.
So today we have Matt Kellison, State Director for MUFON, Florida. Welcome, Matt.
All right. Hi, James. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thanks for making the drive.
Yeah, absolutely.
So describe MUFON for us.
All right. So MUFON stands for the Mutual UFO Network. It's a nonprofit that was established back in 1969, around the same time that Project Blue Book went away. That was the Air Force project. And we have about 7,000 members. Out of the 7,000 members, about 800 of those are field investigators scattered out throughout the 50 states and internationally. So each state has its own MUFON chapter, and I'm the state director for the Florida chapter.
Awesome. It's interesting. I did note that, like in there was a 6-month gap, not gap, a 6-month crossover between when Blue Book ended and MUFON began. So it was kind of ripe, fertile ground to start the organization, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, the public, obviously we know where Blue Book, went with the Air Force, and so yeah, I think the public was ready, to keep that train rolling, even though the Air Force dropped out, which we know that they really didn't drop out. So, and it's been an incredible organization for all these years. We've amassed literally tens of thousands of cases, sighting cases, contact cases, just incredible. A lot of mostly sighting cases. We do deal with experiencers and contactees, and there's a special team within MUFON called the Experiencer Resource Team, or ERT, which I'm a member. We have 6 of those in Florida, including myself. And we treat those cases like a little bit differently than regular sighting cases. We treat the experiencers more, like within the same kind of realm as like HIPAA, as far as privacy and that kind of stuff. We're really there to help, not to investigate. But along the lines, we gather a ton of data about what's going on, especially with the contactees. That's where the real the juice is, I guess. So.
Yeah, that's really interesting stuff. Mm-hmm. And so for contactees, that's someone that's claimed they've had an interaction with an entity or alien.
Right. So it could be even, somebody that's been abducted, or it could be somebody that just comes into contact with a non-human entity, whether that's extraterrestrial or not. I mean, who knows? So the ERT kind of handles most of those cases.
Okay. And the difference between, clearly the sighting explained itself. You saw a craft you couldn't explain. And you have contactee, which you described. What's the experiencer?
Actually, an experiencer is
one and the same.
Kind of everybody rolled into one.
Okay.
It's
Okay. And you've got different groups that handle that. And is there different training for each of these, I would imagine?
Absolutely. Well, for the experiencer team, it's about 4 to 5 months worth of training, and it's oral exams and practice sessions with other members of the ERT. Some of them are doctorate level psychologists and physicians. In fact, the director of our ERT is Dr. George Medich. Yeah. So it's definitely more training than, say, the field investigators get, which is substantial as well. So.
Wow, interesting. So before you got involved with MUFON, you were in the Coast Guard for a number of years, and you had a fairly fairly senior role, it sounds like. Can you talk a little bit about your Coast Guard experience?
Yeah, so I spent 30 years in the Coast Guard. When I retired, I was a chief warrant officer. Actually, my last duty station was out in Houston, Texas. But I spent most of my time here in Florida, mainly up at Clearwater, St. Pete Clearwater, where the Coast Guard Air Station is there. But I went all around the country, Georgia, Oregon, Hawaii, and then Florida, and then Texas. So I saw a lot of the country. Got to meet a lot of interesting people along the way. But what's interesting, though, is my whole time in the Coast Guard was flying on helicopters as a search and rescue air crewman. I never really saw anything weird. We have all these stories about these Navy pilots that are chasing Tic Tacs and that kind of stuff. I never saw anything like that. And I spent a lot of time out over the open water, searching for people. Looking for boats that were missing, that kind of thing. Never saw any USOs, never saw any UFOs or anything. I did, however, had one experience before I went into the Coast Guard. This was 1987, fall of 1987. I was growing up in Virginia, and my parents lived on a lake. It was called Smith Mountain Lake. It's in southwestern Virginia. And one night, my dad and I were standing out on the deck. We lived up in this cove, very, very rural, very quiet. You can hear a conversation from somebody a half a mile away, and it sounds like they're right next to you. So my dad and I noticed this brilliant bright light up in the end of the cove, and it would dip down, in the trees, and then it would pop up in another spot and then move a little bit and then go back down. And at the time, the Virginia State Police was doing marijuana interdiction flights. They would go out at night and use spotlights to find these, small grow operations. And we just kind of wrote it off as that it must have been the state police. Fast forward a little bit, I spend my career flying and around helicopters every single day. And I realized, man, if that were a helicopter, we couldn't hear ourselves think. It would have been so loud, especially those conditions where where everything would echo. It definitely wasn't a helicopter. 1987, there weren't really any drones or anything like that. So, that was my first experience that I didn't even realize was a UFO sighting until much later. So.
Interesting. And let me ask you this: 30 years is a long time to do anything. Mm-hmm. Married, job, and Coast Guard, certainly. How did you get from the Coast Guard to MUFON?
Well, I retired in 2017, and I was out in my neighbor across the street. I was in his driveway talking to him. My wife was with me, and during the conversation, my mind kind of wanders. I'm constantly looking up. I'm into planes, and anything that flies over, I'm interested in seeing what it is. And I was watching an A320 that was taking off out of Tampa, outbound flight that was just to the east of us. And I watched this thing go by, probably 7,000 feet. And then just above that, I caught a glimpse of a bright orange flash. And then when I say flash, it wasn't real quick. It was an orange light, brilliant orange light that stayed on for like 2 seconds and then went out. And then I saw it again. And then I got my wife and my neighbor, I got their attention and said, look what's going on. And they saw it. We counted probably, 8 or 9 of these flashes that would stay on and then go out. I couldn't explain what it was. I'd certainly, been in Florida. I've seen a lot of daytime and nighttime rocket launches. I knew it was nothing like that. I just couldn't wrap my brain around it. I had my cell phone. I took a bunch of pictures and videos. Nothing really came out on them. However, a few of the pictures, bright blue sky, a few clouds. When you zoom in on a few of the pictures, I just saw probably 5 or 6 little tiny white triangle shapes. So I don't know what that was, but I made the report to MUFON. I did most of the investigation myself before I submitted it, and the field investigator that did my case asked me to come on board. And at that point, I was like, oh, I'm hooked. Yeah, I'm in. And that's how I got started.
Nice. And you moved up. Now here you are, state director. Mm-hmm. So what's a state director do?
Unfortunately, a lot less cases than when I was a field investigator. So the field investigators really get all of the most of the investigative work. With the state director, there's a lot of administrative duties and just keeping track of training and making sure that the membership, we have about just shy of 300 members here in Florida. So I need to make sure that they're in the loop. We do member meetings once a month. I think you got the invitation for the one that we just had with Dr. Stankovic, international director for Australia, with MUFON. So yeah, there's more on the membership side, but I still take cases. I'm still a part of the ERT, just not as much as I used to.
Yeah. Well, for me, a few reference points when I think of MUFON, because I've been a UFO geek since I can, as long as I can remember. Mm-hmm. And with MUFON, there were some points of, in fact, Kathleen Martin, Betty and Barney Hill's niece, gave me your information.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's how I got to you. And Denise Stoner, who's got a few books out and is an experiencer herself. I met with them this summer and sat down for a number of hours, and actually asked Kathleen, invited her down, and she said, look, I'm 77. I'm not driving in the car anywhere.
Yeah, she's a sweetheart.
But we got to talk a lot about MUFON and the genesis of it and their time in it, decades ago, what it was like then, and here you are now. Mm-hmm. But when I think of Florida and some of the cases here, there's a few that come to mind historically. Mm-hmm. Like they were more... Well, one was MUFON and one was Blue Book. And the Blue Book one that stands out to me was Sonny DeVoris. I think that's how you pronounce it. But Sonny was a scoutmaster. And it was, I believe, 1952. And it's just south here, West Palm Beach. And about one night, he's a scoutmaster doing scout stuff. And he's got 3 scouts in his car. They're driving home, and it's about 7 miles west of Palm Beach. And back then it was just palmettos and it's like the Everglades terrain. So they're driving and they see a light descend down up the road behind these palmettos. So he pulls over, tells the boys, sit tight. I'm going to go check this out. And if I'm not back in 15 minutes, then, come check. Grabs a machete because you can't get anywhere back there. Starts flashlight, hacking his way back, and they can see his flashlight. But then they see his flashlight start to swing wildly, then they don't see his flashlight. And then it's about 20, 25 minutes. They freak out, go knock on a house. They call the sheriff. Sheriff comes. By that time, he's out. But he's hysterical. He's burnt. And he's talking about this craft, and it emanated some kind of almost like gas or something on him. He's terrified. So... as the story continues, MUFON gets into it. And then back then, it wasn't exactly favorable to be an experiencer, right? So I think a lot of the townspeople, small town in Florida, because he had a background, a dishonorable discharge from the Marines, he, I think, was always trying to make a buck, or something. I can't be, I don't know. I can't speak for the guy, but they really discredited him and shamed him. I think he actually got out of town. But the scouts were there, and the scouts saw a craft descend, and he did come out burnt, and there was trace evidence back there of burnt palmettos. So fast forward, no one can really get a hold of this guy. And in the 90s, he lived his life out in Apopka and passed away in the 90s. Never really looking for, if that was his angle, you think he'd get plenty of interviews, especially by that time when it started to be in a documentary or to be, to get some kind of notoriety. He didn't want anything to do with it. So that one always stood out to me. Right. And then the Gulf Breeze incident, in the 80s, where Ed Walters. Ed Walters was a contractor, and he actually filmed some stuff too on the beach where you can see like an orb, metal craft, and it takes off like the speed of light. And there's a couple videos like that. And then other townspeople are coming out and doing sky watches on the Gulf, and they're seeing this.
Right.
And then there's other videos through, again, kind of the swampy terrain there, and a guy's got this craft that looks very similar to the one Ed started taking pictures of. Problem arose when Ed started getting very clear photographs of saucers, right? And then a couple things, and I've been investigating this. So I found a guy that found the kid who was the son of an attorney, and the kid said, yeah, me and this Ed set up and took these pictures, faked the pictures, but can't explain the other stuff. Then you have Bruce Maccabee, who's a optical physicist for the Navy.
Right.
That's a pro. He's saying these aren't fake.
Right.
So you've got that tension, right?
Right.
And then Ed moves, they find a model looking similar to it, the new owners of the UFO in Ed's house.
Right.
But then you've got all these other hundreds of people saying, I don't know about Ed. We saw this. In fact, they were on Oprah. They had townspeople on Oprah. It got that big. Could you imagine that now?
Yeah,
like
that's
100
incredible.
townspeople on Oprah talking about this. And then I think Unsolved Mysteries went up there and did it. So those are the Florida cases that come to mind that are like, of note.
Yeah. I mean, the thing with the Gulf Breeze cases, so I know Bud Hopkins was involved with that a little bit, and he believed in it that it was real. I tend to lean more toward what, the way Bud looked at it. They were Polaroid pictures.
Yeah.
They're incredibly hard to, fake unless it's set up as a like a model or something like that. But certainly, photoshopping and that stuff didn't exist back then.
That's right.
So yeah, really incredible case. Like I said, I kind of side with Bud Hopkins. So
Yeah. And I know there was some division with MUFON then too, because they were getting two sides of the story. So I think that one was just a big question mark.
Yeah.
And there was actually a group of people that were taken out to the beach. And I think it may have been, and you can correct me, a MUFON investigator, but they were there at a part of the beach only to find themselves and not remember how they got there at a whole other part of the beach.
Right.
Did you ever hear anything?
I didn't hear that.
Yeah, I dug into it.
I knew MUFON did set up a like a hotline for Gulf Breeze, residents or visitors to report their sightings. That I don't know where that went. It'd be interesting to find that archive of all of those. I'm sure that they're in a folder somewhere at MUFON headquarters.
I was trying to dig into that before we ever met too, and it was hard to get. I even did a Information Act with the sheriffs and police up there. They didn't have any reports, but I know people were calling it in then. So I don't know, man. I don't know where that one went.
Yeah.
And the only other real point of reference I had for Florida was a case in Pensacola. And this is a case that a few of the big shows about 10 years ago came out to this guy's house, and him and his family were getting abducted. But it got so, Matt, weird. Like, I couldn't make up these things that this family went through. Got divorced over. He moves into another house. We went up and stayed in that house for 3 days.
Wow.
And we did experience some very weird things in there.
Yeah.
And he's got Tupperware or Walmart-sized storage bins full of cell phones. And I'm like, what's all that about? He said he's built these elaborate reflective things to try to catch images of them. He said, whenever I get an image of it, they burn out my cell phone. These are burned out cell phones.
Oh, wow.
There's literally like 100 of them. And I'm like, that's crazy. And interviewed his wife, ex-wife, and adult children. And I thought, maybe they'll say he's just nuts. But they were reluctant to come forward. When they did come forward, she broke down in tears.
Right.
And what the line she told me, she said, if you experience what we experience, your idea of reality would be shattered.
Yeah.
And the daughter described waking up one night, the room full of butterflies and moths, so thick it was like smoke, and she had to crawl out underneath them. The son was talking about these things knocking on the window to let him in. They had everything almost paranormal-like, people in 1880 clothes appearing in the window, them taking his children, and when they take him, looking at him and telepathically saying, does this bother you? And he said, I guess I have to trust you, but why me? And he always says it's a lady, and she said, "You're special." Mm-hmm. And then I come to find his brother, adult brother and sister, who are all 50, 60 years old, had these childhood experiences leading on up. So that's my kind of point of reference for the Florida weirdness.
Right.
But maybe quid pro quo. I've kind of given you what I know about Florida. I know you came loaded with some cases
Absolutely,
that we'd love to hear about.
Yeah. Well, real quickly, just to tag along off of what you were talking about, what I've noticed, especially with the experiencer cases, we try to delineate, there's UFOs are in one category, sightings are experiencers, abductions, that kind of thing are in this category. We got ghosts, we've got Bigfoot, we've got cryptids, and they're all like, these different things. And what I've found is, especially when talking to these experiencers, they're traumatized. Yeah. They've got PTSD. They can't talk to anybody. They can't talk to their family members, their friends. A lot of times, if they were to say anything to somebody at work, they might lose their job. They're traumatized. They have nobody to talk to, and there's no benefit whatsoever for them coming out. But I do find with the experiencers that there's some bleed over. Most experiencers that I speak with, they report poltergeist activity in their home. Yeah. They see orbs in their home. They have chairs and cabinets moving and strange noises and stuff. You'd normally associate that with poltergeist or paranormal ghost stuff. I've got a case that I'm going to talk about, which was not a UFO case at all. It was a cryptid case. In fact, why don't I go ahead and dive into that one?
Let's get into it now.
All right. So this was May of 2023. This gentleman who lives in Florida, he was on an Alaskan cruise, and they're pulling in early one morning into Juneau. So they're going up the shipping channel. He's standing out on his balcony. He's on the right. The left side, port side of the ship, and he's looking at the beach. It's a narrow waterway, beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And he sees this creature or an animal on the beach, and he thinks it's a person at first, and then as he's watching it, the way that it's walking along the beach, it's got a weird gait. It turns and looks at him and then turns around and starts running. And he said when it ran, it was almost like a robotic ostrich or something. Really, really weird. So he ran back into the cabin, grabbed his phone, came out, snapped one picture, which I gave you.
All right.
It's weird. And then it just turned and ran up into the woods, and he was completely freaked out by it. So he makes this report to MUFON thinking, oh, this must have been some kind of alien or something. And I look at it, and there's no UFO sightings in the area at the time, no other witness reports. It's just basically he saw this creature entity. And so I looked at things like, there's sometimes bears can walk on their, hind legs, that kind of thing. And I've ruled that out based off of the picture, which you'll see. And so then I started diving into the local folklore. And there's an indigenous tribe up there. It's the Tlingit tribe. And they, in their oral traditions, they have a creature that's called the Kushdaka, which means land otter man.
Oh.
And so I often wondered, man, is this what he saw? Was that that whatever these indigenous people have been describing for years? Maybe he encountered one. They're in the same general area. But the weirdest part about that case is, so he's kind of freaked out. This witness is kind of freaked out anyway because of what he saw. And he asked me, so are you in Alaska or Florida? I said, I'm in Florida. He said, I grew up in Florida. Where do you live? And I said, well, like 30 minutes north of St. Pete, Clearwater. That's where I grew up. We go back and forth until we finally get down to the address where I grew up was, bam, my address. He lived in my house. And so I had converted one of the rooms, one of the bedrooms after my kids left. I converted one of the rooms into a home office, and I was sitting in his bedroom that he grew up in, talking on the phone to him about this cryptid in Alaska, and which freaked him out even more.
It kind of freaks me out. Yeah.
And so I ran it through ChatGPT just to figure out what are the odds.
Yeah.
So 1 in 29 million are the odds, or it's the equivalent of flipping a quarter, doing a coin flip and having it land on heads 25 times in a row, or randomly picking 1 second out of an entire year. That's the odds.
That's wild.
And that's what I found, that these coincidences like this, they happen all the time. And the more that I study this stuff, the more they happen. The more I recognize that they're happening, they happen even more. And so much so, I keep a log of all this stuff. It's that's wild. Really cool.
That is really wild.
Yeah, but
man, well, that's the otter man. It's funny because making documentaries on paranormal stuff, I did a number of years back. There was an otter man, but I thought it was in Florida somewhere. But it was, I believe, indigenous, and it wasn't me. It was someone that I was it was kind of researcher up in North Florida. That was we were having a conversation one time, and it might have been another area of the country. But when I heard otter man, my ears perked up a little bit. That's cool. Wild.
Yeah.
Well, let's keep going. You got some other ones there.
All right. So this is another one of the cases I did. This was a case. It happened over in the Indian River Lagoon over there by Titusville. Yeah. So it's the river that separates the mainland Florida from Cape Canaveral. So this happened, this would have been August of 2019. There was a PhD level biologist. She was out in a 15-foot skiff out on the river doing her research. I don't want to get too specific because a lot of times, it's so specific that you would be able to single these people out. And I know most people want to keep their anonymity. So this researcher by herself out in the middle of the Indian River Lagoon, she's got her binoculars around her neck. She's writing in her log that whatever she's measuring, doing her research notes, and she catches something out of the corner of her eye. She thinks, oh, it must be a plane or something, or so she glances back at it, and she realizes this is a large chrome saucer that's hovering about 100 feet off the water, less than a mile away from her. She looks at it for a few minutes, or for a few seconds. Then she remembers she's got a set of binoculars, on her chest. So she reaches, grabs the binoculars, looks through them. She's got about 30 seconds of looking at this thing through 10 by 50 high-powered Nikon binoculars. She remembers that she's got her camera in a wet bag that is, has a telephoto lens on it. So while she's still looking through the binoculars, holding them with one hand, she uses the other hand to reach into the bag to pull out her camera. She said as soon as her hand touched the camera, this thing disappears from view through the binoculars. And I said, it flew away pretty fast, or, that kind of thing. And she said, no, it just blinked out of existence while she was looking at it. Completely freaked her out. But she was really curious about the whole thing. That's why she made the report. But
yeah, and I've heard that with a lot of the reports. It's not like it took off at a high rate of speed. It just literally, like a light switch, cut out.
Yeah.
So a craft about a mile away from her over the water, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Traditional flying saucer.
Yeah, just incredible.
That's wild.
So, but yeah, and we had obviously not lots. I mean, like I said, it's about 7 to 12% of our cases are logged as unknowns. A lot of those are weird lights in the skies that do different things, but the nuts and bolts stuff is the really interesting cases. So we have reports of discs, but then we also have a lot of reports of chrome spheres. So,
Okay.
recently in the news, we've had the Buga sphere out of Colombia that they're analyzing. Apparently that thing is, 13,000 years old, so that's interesting. I know Dr. Stephen Greer has, got his hands into that. Then there's, the Mosul orb, chrome sphere. And in Florida, we had the Betts sphere. Really weird. This couple back in, I think it was the mid-'70s, that they found this chrome-looking sphere up, I think it was St. John's River, like up near Jacksonville. And they put it on the floor, it would roll around their house on its own, kind of thing. I don't know whatever happened to that. It's kind of disappeared.
It's funny. We had someone that wrote a book on the whole theory of what these spheres are on the show, and that's another Florida one I forgot to mention. But the Navy came and picked it up, I guess, for analysis, and then when whatever they brought back wouldn't do. Oh yeah, it stopped. It just stopped. It was like a dud, or they don't really know what happened to it, and then it disappeared altogether.
Yeah.
So that was always an interesting one. I was going to ask you too. Do you see trends in when we're talking about craft? And you'd mentioned the saucer, and you mentioned the spheres. Is there a trend in sightings of different, like waves of different sightings where, let's say, for an example, in 1 week you get someone reporting spheres or orbs, but a year later they're reporting triangles, or a year later they're reporting craft? Is there any pattern to that at all?
It's kind of a mixed bag. Definitely we've had more spheres. Spheres and black triangles are really the predominant ones here. And then, we get, the lights or orbs, which I have my own, theory about that. I feel like, these, or, I think there's a kind of a confusion about when you use the term orb. An orb is, I know with the paranormal researchers, an orb is like something that's, floating through your home and kind of small. But I think a lot of times people report orbs as like glowing objects that are moving throughout the sky. And I think my theory on that is that, and this one of the cases that I'll talk about here in a little bit, will kind of describe it further, but that's just like whatever the physics that are involved with how these craft operate, whether they're in like a bubble of some kind, that, the craft is actually probably inside, and then the visible shield or whatever that's surrounding it is kind of what we
illuminates.
See. So it's
at night.
Yeah, so I think there's some misconceptions about orbs, whether there's different types, and
Look, if we had it figured out, we wouldn't be talking right now. That's why it's so interesting, right?
Yeah, but so predominantly spheres, some black triangles, and some discs thrown in there, and it's just kind of a mixed bag. But speaking of spheres, though, we did have a great case that was October 2023 at the Bradenton, Sarasota International Airport, right up the road here. There was a gentleman that was standing in the gate, and he saw one of these spheres that was cruising across the ramp, maybe 50 to 100 feet off the ground, just cruised right by the window at the gate, and he filmed it. So interesting. We did some analysis on that, but and we've had several other sphere cases too that are just as interesting. But as far as the black triangles go, I think the most memorable black triangle case that we've had in Florida. It happened December 5th, 2023, in the Ocala National Forest. So this would have took place on, it was Highway 19, or State Road 19, that goes, it's north and south through the Ocala National Forest. And we're talking about 20 miles of just 2-lane highway and gigantic pine trees on each side. And so there was the witness was a woman in her 30s. She was northbound in her car. She had her dog in the back seat, and she heard this really weird screeching sound. And at the same time, her dog in the back became very distressed and started, kind of howling. At that point, her car died, and she was following an 18-wheeler, big tractor-trailer truck. The tractor-trailer truck died, so it came to a stop in the middle of the road, and then two southbound cars ended up stopping, kind of nearby them. So as people are starting to get out of their cars, this black triangle, big black triangle, comes whizzing over their heads. It's so low that it topped off one of the trees.
It connected with one of the trees?
Absolutely, and the branch fell to the ground. And this was followed by, a few seconds later, by two Air Force F-16s that were chasing this thing. Now, the witness was an Air Force veteran, so she's very familiar with the type of planes, the F-16s that were chasing this. But the folks that were there on the road, they were, for whatever reason, they were traumatized by the whole thing. The truck driver, when he got out of the cab, his ear was bleeding. One of the drivers from another car sat in the road and had a mental breakdown, just crying. Just really profound experience for this thing when this thing flew over. And then everybody, the weird part is that all their vehicles started back up on their own. If it's a electromagnetic EMF, I could kind of see that with the cars. The truck, though, that's diesel.
Yeah.
That's not how diesels work.
Right.
It's not electric. It's so that's a head scratcher.
What did a couple things on that one? There's a history of craft flying over cars and the cars shut off, and then they don't have to restart the car. When the craft leaves, the car starts back up automatically. That's anomalous by anybody's book, right? So that sounds like that's what happened there.
Right. And I think, the more you research this, the weirder it gets. There's some physicists. Look at like Hal Puthoff and James Lukatsky. They talk about the physics of these craft that were supposedly reverse engineering, and what they're talking about probably behind closed doors in the skiff up at on Capitol Hill. But the general thought, and I think with these physicists that are looking into this, is that these craft travel by creating some kind of a warp bubble around them, where they can manipulate time and space together. And so, like in the case of the Tic Tac, where you've got what David Fravor described as, if you put a ping pong ball in a glass box and shook it, that's how this Tic Tac was maneuvering. But if this thing has a warp bubble around it, then time acts differently on the inside than it does on the outside. So on the inside, the occupants may be, it's a leisurely, flight path that, comes to a stop and then reverses course. But because time is different on the outside of the bubble, you might see it as these erratic motions. And so if it's a time manipulation effect is causing all of these weird anomalies associated with these sightings, like the cars turning off, and that it may be related to that.
It's something, because this is that's wild. Now, did the Air Force ever cop to sending out F-16s, or what was their response back? Because I'm sure you reached out to the Air Force.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, David Toon, one of our field investigators, he reached out, never got a word back, and that's he was he's retired Army helicopter pilot. He flew Apaches, very familiar with military aviation operations, and he no response.
They just iced him out, huh?
Yeah.
Does that, in your experience, does that happen a lot? If people are that, that's a pretty dramatic case where F-16s are chasing a black triangle. Have you had any other experience where you've had to try to interface or ask the Air Force if they've heard or seen anything related to a case?
Not so much the Air Force. I know David, reached out to them. I put in a FOIA request for some Navy documents, and this revolves around a case. This was a historic case. Let's see. So July 1971, I had a witness that. And I love these old military cases because it's, at one point these people were ordered to keep their mouth shut, and then they reach a certain point in their life, way later in their life when they're much older, where they feel comfortable talking about it because what are they going to do to me,
Right.
So I had this gentleman. He was a Navy veteran, radarman. He was stationed aboard the USS W.S. Sims, which was a Knox-class frigate. They were doing tests off about 200 miles off the coast of Florida, off of Jacksonville. And so what they were doing was they were working with a diesel-electric submarine. They had a new sonar on the ship that they were testing out. And then for days, they were just chasing this diesel-electric submarine around and testing their new sonar. And so the way diesel-electric works is that underwater they're working on a battery, but the battery runs down, so they have to surface and then charge up the battery again before they dive. So this is about 2 o'clock in the morning, around the first part of July 1971. The submarine had surfaced. It's sitting about a mile to the east of the ship. And this gentleman, the radar operator, he's in the radar room behind the bridge. And he picks up these 3 blips on the radar. So the radar scope is has a 50-mile range. Mm-hmm. And these 3 blips are heading right toward them. And he estimated that between 60 and 90 seconds, those 3 radar blips were right on top of the ship. So 60 to 90 seconds covering 50 miles equals about 2,000 to 3,000 miles per hour. 1971, our only technology that could really go that fast was SR-71.
Right.
SR-71 can't stop on a dime and hover over a ship in the middle of the Atlantic. So these objects hovered over top of the ship, and then they, for about 30 seconds, moved over to the submarine and hovered over top of that, and then shot off to the north at incredible speed. So not much of an investigation that we can do. We're just basically documenting.
So he came forward after a lot of years, is what you're telling me.
Oh yeah.
And did they have a shape to him or anything?
No. They were in a triangle formation.
Okay.
But the interesting thing was when I started researching to see if there were other historical cases like that, and there was a case that was reported to the National UFO Reporting Center. And let's see, that was case number 13385. New Fork is, run by Peter Davenport. It's similar to MUFON, although they don't do investigation. They do some investigations, I believe, but for the most part, they're just documenting.
Reports, yeah.
So there was a case in New Fork that described a similar instance with the USS John F. Kennedy. July 2nd, 1971, same exact location. In this case, this orange 300-foot diameter ball hovered 100 feet over the flight deck for about 20 minutes. It shut down the whole ship, shut down off all of their electronics. There were 2 F-4s. There were the alert aircraft on the deck that were running. They shut down, and a jet engine is very similar to a diesel engine.
Right.
So the physics behind how those shut off is interesting, because usually it's mechanical. You pull the fuel and it shuts the engine off. You starve it. You don't flip a switch. So 20 minutes later, the thing shoots off and power comes back on and everything's kind of restored. And then on their way back to Norfolk, where the ship was home ported, at some point the captain came over the 1MC, which is the intercom system on board the ships, and said, "No one is to speak about this incident unless you have a need to know. This didn't happen." So
what's interesting is the National UFO Reporting Center. I actually pulled Rob Gribble. He was a guy that took a lot of these reports, and then Peter, I think, took it over. And I don't even, is Peter still alive?
Yeah.
So Peter's still doing it. So I've got recordings from 1974 through 1977, hundreds of audio recordings of the actual reports people were calling in, and I'm familiar with that one.
Yeah.
Of all things.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so the one you just described, the one previous to that, those were the same year?
Same year, same month, around,
same part of the ocean?
This gentleman didn't remember the exact date. He said it was early July or so, 1971.
Yeah.
The Newport case with the USS John F. Kennedy was July 2nd, 1971. So I reached out to the National Archives, and there's a lot of shipboard logbooks that you can look at that go all the way back, to World War II. For those two ships, 1971, they weren't there. And I reached out to the National Archives. I got a response from them saying, oh, yeah, those records have been removed because the National Archives is working with the VA to digitize all of these logs for asbestos claims. And they wouldn't be available, they're not available, and they're not sure when they'll come back online. So,
well, that's not the first time we've heard that before.
But there's plenty of logbooks pre-1971.
It's always that period of time, and we've heard about it even in the recent, like with the Tic Tac case and those when they go to get not so much the logbooks but the data,
right?
And it's been taken. Someone took the data, and it's nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
So what's that all about, right? That's something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why would you do that?
Yeah.
Why would you do that? I know we were talking the last few weeks. And I'm just dying to hear about this. We've talked about some of the sightings cases and even the crazy Otterman cryptid case, which is wild. You had a case that I don't know how much you can talk about if you've got some confidentiality, but someone that had a contactee case that was very, very interesting. I think you know which one I'm referring to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's maybe you can roll that one out.
All right. Yeah. So this gentleman, he contacted me back in last November 2024, and he told me that he has this video taken from inside a craft.
From inside a craft.
From inside a craft that was taken during an abduction, and I'd never heard of anything like that before. It doesn't fit the typical abduction. What I normally hear from experiencers, and I told him, of course, I'm interested. And then finally, in this past spring, he submitted his case to MUFON. So because I'd already had contact with him in November, I took the case. So it's there's a nuts and bolts investigation portion to it, and then which is the sighting portion, and then there's also the experiencer portion, and they're typically done separately. But since I'm doing both sides of it, I kind of did them both at the same time. The story goes that the incident, he discovered the video while he was sitting on his deck of his townhome. He lived in Key West, Florida at the time, and he was going through his phone looking at deleting old pictures and stuff, and he came across this video that he had no idea was even on his phone. And he opened it up, and it's weird.
Holy crap. Holy crap. It's crazy. Fuck. Holy crap. Holy crap. It's crazy.
recording happened on June 12th, 2021. Started at 1:15 a.m. And so he had no recollection of taking this. And just I'll briefly describe what the video looks like. It's a 42-second video. It's extremely grainy. It was obviously filmed in a very, very dark setting. I've watched this. I've looked at this thing from at least 500 times, maybe more than that. And I'm doing the analysis on Adobe Premiere Pro, so I'm going frame by frame and doing adjustments and seeing if each frame stands out. There's 1,275 total frames. It was filmed at 30 frames per second. So, to me, as I looked at this, I've kind of got this image of my head about how the layout works. It reminds me of, and this is going to sound goofy, but it reminds me of the bridge of Star Trek: The Next Generation, not the original, but okay.
Okay.
So there's this large, dark, circular disc-shaped thing, like on the ceiling. There's like a ringed light on the ceiling. There's like a huge view screen or window in the background. Which is kind of like a window, I guess. So outside of the window, there's the top of a cell phone tower. The cell phone tower has two red lights on it, as required by the FAA because there's two airports right there,
right.
Next to where this guy lived. There's Key West International, and then there's the Key West Naval Air Station on Boca Chica. So this area is sandwiched like right in between those two airports. So obviously the cell phone tower has two obstruction lights as required by the FAA. Those red lights that are on the top of the cell phone tower, they flash 30 times a second. So every 2 seconds there's a flash. And those are going off during the entirety of the video. And when they go off, they create this eerie red haze throughout the whole scene, because there's some kind of like fog, like mist, or there's some kind of vapor that's in the room or of this, wherever they are, this craft. But it's obviously parked right next to the top
at elevation.
Elevation, yeah,
Okay.
because the lights and the antennas, the cell phone antennas that are mounted on the tower are like level with the viewer, with the recorder.
So it's not like he could go out in his garage or something, because this is elevated off the ground.
Right.
And they're what? How tall are they, would you estimate?
Well, 110 feet.
So 110
Yeah.
feet up.
Now
he's filming this. Somehow.
Now this tower is visible from his residence.
Okay.
But it's a half a mile or a third of a mile away to the south. So yeah, definitely would be able to see it, but not up close, right next to it. Like,
whatever this is, this room is next to it, and that being next to it indicates the room's 110 feet at least tall.
Right. So that's what it appears to be. Yeah. Now, every few seconds, there's like a dark triangular, like almost like a pointer that looks like it's rotating around the ringed light at the top, and that will come into view every few seconds.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out the period, the frequency with which it's shown, and that's part of my analysis that I'm doing right now. I've been working on this thing since May. It will probably be another month or so before I wrap things up, because it's just so tedious. But so that's the nuts and bolts. What you see, that black disc kind of has a rotational effect to it. It's spinning counterclockwise. But as I'm looking at this video, I see figures, I see movement, and it appears that there's a being that's maybe 2 or 3 feet in front of the camera, that looks like a gray, that's kind of like staring at the phone camera, and he's kind of a little bit of a rock to him. Right next to him, and this sounds really weird, there is, to that entity's right, which would be the left-hand side of the frame, there's this something that looks like a frog's head. So like
Really?
kind of reptilian. There's another couple of frames that show like what looks like a gray that's in the mid, not closer toward where the window is. So with perspective a little bit smaller than the being that's right there in front. And then there's some movement off to the right that I have not really honed in on and figured out what they are. But it's weird. It's almost like each frame, if you could combine the frame before with the frame after, and then combine them into the same, I think it would make it much clearer, because most of the time I'm like scrolling back and forth to see like movement in order to get an idea of what each object or what what the being is. It's not clear at all. But this video was, I'm not the first to look at it. I think there were 4 other photo analysis labs around the country, and then also in Europe. In particular, there's this one lab. It's called Hidden Worlds. Is the name of the lab. It's the CEO is Stephen Leah, Leeah, and he's a quantum. He does quantum imagery analysis. He's had contracts with the Department of Defense, or now Department of War, the Department of Energy, looking at like high speed, photography that they've done to analyze ballistics and that kind of stuff. And he said it's a legit video. Everything that you're seeing in it and everything described by this witness is there. So
That's wild.
Yeah.
I mean, look, we're talking about the video of an inside of a UFO.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we've ever. I've heard abduction cases and regressions describing the inside of craft, but I don't know that anyone's ever seen what's alleged to be the inside of a craft.
Yeah, this is, it's incredible. It's not clear, that's for sure. I mean, it like I'm 500 times viewing it, and I'm still like scratching my head, going, "What is this?" But certain elements do stand out, and for one thing, the tower is the big thing. But this experiencer, he lifelong experiences, and I'm hoping that he writes a book. They're incredible. Back in the late '90s, he was regressed by Bud Hopkins a couple of times. And when he found this video, he reached out to Yvonne Smith, who I'm sure you're aware of. Does hypnotic regression therapy for abductees? Probably at this point one of the more famous ones.
Right.
And she was able to help him pull some of the information out that he wasn't remembering. But the gist of it was that he had pulled into his the condo area parking lot around 1 o'clock. He got out of his car. He was walking to the door of his condo, which was on the side, and he was on this stone pathway. There's a gate in front of him. On the other side of the gate is a golf course, and he sees a gray standing at the gate. And he is paralyzed. He's got his phone in his hand. He's paralyzed. He's levitated a few inches off the ground, and he is floated toward the gate. He and this gray go through the gate out onto the golf course, and he sees a gigantic orange ball of light out on the golf course. As he gets closer to it, what he realizes that inside of that is a disc-shaped silver chrome saucer. And so that's why I brought that up. Oh yeah, earlier.
The kind of the energy field around the craft inside.
And then that's where his memory ends. And he surmised that the reason why he was able to use his phone was whatever method of paralysis that these beings used on him. I think he had just had hip replacement surgery, or he had some significant pain in his hips, or in his hip, and he kind of put together that maybe the pain, like his pain level was so high that like they didn't paralyze him enough, kind of thing, or that maybe that's how he was able to,
Have
hit
the
the
wherewithal or
record
some kind
button.
of conscious moment.
But it appears that he didn't stop the recording at 42 seconds. I think they stopped the recording at 42 seconds by killing the power to the phone. So it wasn't stopped. It ended, and it ended in a weird way because there was a strip of light on the last 2 or 3 frames on the right hand side, pure white. And I thought, well, that must be just a camera artifact of the abrupt, turning the power off while it's filming. But when I look at it, it has the same kind of movement that the disc on the ceiling has, like it's scrolling up. In another one of his abduction experiences, he said that the craft that he had been on had a dark spot, a dark area, and a very bright area, like that was the exam portion. And so I wonder if maybe this was the lighted portion of the craft that we're seeing in the last 2 or 3 frames.
Maybe they're like, we're leading you into the examination
Yeah.
room. We got to cut off the video,
Yeah.
count backwards from 10,
Yeah.
and we're taking you in, and you catch the edge of it.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Like, at the very least, Bud Hopkins and John Mack, we're familiar with his work.
Absolutely, yeah.
When they didn't always agree on everything, but John Mack was a Pulitzer Prize winner, Harvard psychologist who almost lost everything over investigating abduction cases and coming to his professional opinion that the cases he's worked with, the patterns, that they're real, that this is a real phenomena. Not that he has any answers to it, but he gave an example of someone living in a remote area of Brazil, no access to no reference point to say grays or abductions, having the same experience as someone in New York that's abducted, women. And he said what was even more remarkable was the process of the abduction, how they were taken, the means in which they were taken, describing how they were taken as far as like being floated through what normally you couldn't float through, and then a procedure done and the same type of instruments in the order of operations that respectively that were used on them. And so long story short is that's amazing. And I know that, full transparency here, we'd love to see that. We'd love to see it. And I know that that's something you can't just say, here, I've got it on my phone, and there's some witness protection type, that you'd have to respect. And so by the time this comes out, there's a shot that we may have that video at least to look at.
Yeah. One thing I also want to bring out about this experiencer, he had some significant nosebleeds after one of his abduction experiences, and he was having really terrible, migraine headaches. So we went to a neurologist. He lived in upstate New York at the time. Visited a neurologist, and they did MRI scans. The neurologist said, well, you've got this thing called a Rathke's cleft cyst, which is a benign cyst on your the pituitary gland that is prevalent in 2% of the world population. So 2% of the world's population has this cyst. Not a big deal. And so this experiencer said, he said, hey, doc, what if I took your pen and I put a BB on the end of your pen and I jammed it up my nose and then I hit it with a hammer? Would that be about the area where this Rathke's cleft cyst would be? And he said, the neurologist looked at him and said, do you think you've been abducted? And
he just came out with it.
Yeah. And he said, well, yeah. And he said, well, that's interesting because he's had 3 other patients that have had the same claim that were associated with Rathke's cleft cyst. So I don't know if there's a connection there or not. I mean, I definitely think that more people have been abducted than what we think. Yeah. I mean, it's not a rare occurrence. I think this happens, all the time, and like tens of thousands of people, if not many, many more than that. And I base this off of speaking with these experiencers. I've worked with about 50 so far since I've been with the Experiencer Resource Team, and I can tell you, like I said, these people they've been through a traumatic experience. Sometimes not just them, maybe one of their parents, but then maybe like their kids are experiencing the same thing. So it's like a generational thing, and it is very difficult for these people to even talk about it. But one thing I've noticed is that they're like John Mack and Bud Hopkins. They have their patterns and their specific patterns that are common to just about every one of these. And and you could say, well, these people must have got this information off of a Reddit subreddit or something. But when I talk to these people, they're traumatized. Yeah. They are absolutely traumatized. A lot of them can barely speak. They're crying. They're very emotional about it. But you'd think that if they're just making this up, then I would have 50 experiencers that are telling me 50 completely different stories. Every one of these stories has elements that are spot on with the last one and the next one. And there's a lot of, and I don't want to give away too much, about the commonalities, but, they're there. They're there, and I can't explain it other than this is real and it happened.
Yeah.
So,
again, looking at that, when I was looking at the work of John Mack and Bud Hopkins and talking to you, and you see the number of cases you've worked on, and they were trying to do some statistics on, so like anything else, it's almost like a rape, like that type of trauma where they've been violated, and there's so many that go unreported. Right. So they're trying to kind of categorize based on how many they actually had reported, how many go unreported, and they did some other surveys, some polling, so people wouldn't have to come out with it. It was just a private poll, and the numbers were kind of staggering. The amount of people that either believed they had been abducted. So it's wild. Yeah. That's wild. Well, keep us posted on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Look, that's probably a good Spike the Football moment, man. I don't know if we can beat that one. And I've got to show you this too. Well, we got it. Card carrying MUFON member here.
Yeah. Welcome to MUFON.
Yeah, exactly. So a little bit about that. How can people become involved with MUFON?
Yeah, so the best thing to do would be to go to MUFON's website, so www.mufon.com. You can join. There's a bunch of membership plans, just basic membership plans, all the way up to research level, where you have access to all kinds of documents. The Aquarius Project, which has photos from that go all the way back. Just archives, Stringfield Diaries. Nice. You name it. There's a ton of stuff there. So whatever level, you can join MUFON, become a member, and then if you'd like to become a field investigator, then there's on MUFON.com. There's also a tab on how to become a field investigator, and it's basically you purchase the field investigator's manual, you study it. There's an exam, but then once you become a member of the investigative team for whatever state you're in, then you're under a mentorship program where you do a certain number of cases until you're proficient, and you kind of do them in tandem with a more senior investigator. But yeah, everything's at www.mufon.com.
Nice. And I guess if you're a field investigator, you can pick as much as involved as you want to be. Like if you're retired and you've got full time, you can be full time. Or if you're like, some people are like, I'd like to do it, but like look at it maybe that they'd have to commit full time. Do they have to, or can they just? Yeah.
The requirement is to maintain your field investigator certification. You have to work on a case within 6 months. If you go beyond the 6 month period, then then you have to go through some training again. But we have people that just want to do one case at a time. We have people that want to do anything that you throw at them, they'll do. And then as far as the experiencer portion of it, once you reach, I think it's 15 cases, then you can apply to be on the experiencer team. But the training for that is pretty involved. Like I said, it's a lot of reading, a lot of research, to become familiar with the history of it, for one. We're so lucky in Florida. We have Kathleen Martin.
Yeah.
She's a Florida MUFON member, and she is actually the one that established the Experiencer Resource Team. That was hers.
I didn't know that she started it.
Yeah, she was the catalyst for that, the creation of the ERT, what it is now.
I have a friend who from Costa Rica, cameraman, and he confided in me when we were filming one time that something happened in Costa Rica, and it was wild. Like this experience of something came through the window, actually put its fingers in his stomach, made this incision, went back out. All the glass went back and covered up the window on the way out, and roommate kicked the door in, and it said when it left this gel, and he was covered in gel, and he had blood in his stomach, and traumatized. He's only told a few people. So I actually introduced him to Kathleen, and they were working together for quite a while on that.
Oh, wow.
But that's how I kind of got to interface with her and talk to her about this stuff. And then I found out that, she does regressions and stuff.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how involved. I always knew she was Betty and Barney Hill's niece from the famous, incident. I didn't realize that she had this whole body of work within MUFON. Yeah. And then she had introduced me to Denise Stoner, who also you probably know.
Yeah, she was the state director for MUFON a few years ago. I'm good friends with Denise. And she's awesome.
Sweet. I picked her up from her house and took her to Kathleen so we could do some filming one day. But and it's so you see these two. It looks like two sweet grandmas coming in, just for an afternoon of tea. And it's like, you hear their stories, you're like, whoa, this is wild.
Right.
So last thing, and I'll just want to get your take on this. With disclosure being on the Richter scale, kind of higher than it's ever been, as far as third round of congressional hearings. You've got whistleblowers in SCIFs. You've got whistleblowers we've been talking to that some are encouraged, some are discouraged for a variety of reasons, right? A lot of them are like, don't even bother. It's not worth it. Some are saying, well, this is important. Let's keep pressing on. Having said that, it kind of struck me that with MUFON being on the private side, but involved in a lot of cases, is there ever an intersection with the government and MUFON?
Yeah, absolutely. I know Bob Spearing, the director of international investigations, and his team have worked, a little bit with some, Congress in regard to these hearings, to kind of get them up to speed on what's going on in their congressional districts. And so I know there is a little bit of interface there. David McDonald, as the executive director for MUFON, I know he's heavily involved with that as well. So whether I think disclosure is going to happen, I don't know. For millions of people, disclosures already happen. They've been there. Yeah, they've seen it up close. You don't have to prove anything to them. As far as the government coming out and saying, "Hey, they're here," that may happen. But I tell you, the biggest roadblock is if we truly are reverse engineering this technology that would, overnight kill the oil and gas industry, which is the lifeblood of the world economy. I don't think that's ever going to happen, the way that we think. So, but for me, I would just like for the government to come out and say, yeah, they're real. I mean, just an admission from the government, I think because the evidence is all over the place.
I think you put it best when you just said that, like for millions of people, disclosure's already happened, right? And you're on the front lines of that,
yeah,
so
absolutely.
You should know.
Yeah.
Well, listen, let's keep in touch. You're
Absolutely.
just up the road,
yeah.
So we'll definitely have you back in. We'll definitely catch up on bring your catalog of new cases
Right.
or interesting one that's fun to talk about.
Yeah,
and people love to
absolutely.
hear about them. These are cases that you're not going to hear about on YouTube or in a documentary. So this is awesome. And then if you have anybody else too that even I don't know how experiencers feel about telling their story, but if you ever get one that wants to tell their story
Yeah, absolutely.
on camera, we'd
Yeah.
love to have them.
All right, that sounds great. And I do want to throw in there that MUFON Florida does have a Facebook page. You just have to go to MUFON Florida within Facebook, and pretty easy to find. But and we post stuff on there as well. So
Yep. So get your membership, log on, and I can't thank you enough. Appreciate you being here.
yeah, absolutely. I had a great time. Thank you.